The Formed Book Club. Catholic book lovers unpacking good books, chapter by chapter.
Welcome to the Formed Book Club. We continue to discuss Father Spitzer's Science at the Doorstep to God. We are in the chapter, I think it's chapter 6, part 2, page 202, the divine origin of conscience. In the last session, we talked about the numinous and how the numinous, as a universal or almost universal experience, points to the existence of that which the experience is of, namely something tremendous, awesome, fearful, desirable, but beyond our experience. Now we are going to look at the experience of conscience, which we all have. And he says on the paragraph there is a second manifestation of the presence of God in our souls, our consciences. Lady and gentlemen, would you like to either to opine, comment?
Well, it's interesting. I thought maybe Joseph might take off on this point. It's interesting that he starts the discussion of the conscience with literature. The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. It's interesting that I'm glad he did, because we are working out in literature human experience, and the reality of conscience in these stories wouldn't be there if the authors themselves hadn't some familiarity with the operations of their conscience.
Yeah, and the other thing about it, of course, the way that we observe the existence of conscience is through action and reaction, right? So obviously story, whether it's a life story like a biography or whether it's a work of literature, is the means by which we observe the conscience in action. But I do find it interesting. I just highlighted the passage on the next page. We seem to be, it's the end of the paragraph there, middle of the page, 203. We seem to be obligated and guided by a moral force that is beyond our control. So that's sort of way of, if you like, defining the conscience. A moral force that guides and seems to obligate us, that's beyond our control. It's there whether we like it or not, and obviously, as often as not, we don't like it or want it to be there. And that, I think, as another proof of the existence of God, the existence of conscience, I think, is actually quite it's quite a persuasive proof of the existence of God, because it's quite clearly, as much as we can try to drown it out, we can try to get rid of it, but it's insistent, persistent, and it's almost something which can't be exorcised. It's part of who we are, and I think that is a powerful argument for. The other semantic question, by the way, is, because I've been discussing with a scientist friend, he would say that we use the word proofs, such as in St. Thomas Aquinas, proofs of this of God, too liberally, and they're not really proofs in a empirical scientific sense. They're arguments, inklings. So anyway, irrespective, I do think one of the major arguments, inklings, proofs for the existence of God is the existence of the conscience.
Well, you pointing out that, and it's something you can't seem to get rid of, and these literary examples are exactly that, characters who try to get rid of their consciences and it doesn't work. And people could say, well, that's just a story, but I think all of us have our own experiences of, even trying to justify an act in the face of something telling you, don't do this, and arguing with it. What are we arguing with? What, if there's nothing there, there's nothing to argue with, okay?
I want to try and be fair to those who may not have our view on things, and therefore may not accept these arguments, by giving counter arguments, or devil's advocate, so to speak, which of course is a great characteristic of the wonderful scholar. Thomas Aquinas always had his thesis, but he said said contra. On the other hand, here's what others say, But we were listening to one of these great courses recently on various discoveries, and one of them had to do with birds migrating from Alaska to New Zealand, who actually can, young first-year birds, they can fly 7,000 kilometers or miles, whatever it is, nonstop, and they can go to the nest they were in the year. The second-year birds go to the nest they were in the year before. That's pretty good. That's pretty good navigation. How do they do that? Well, part of it is the stars, part of the angle of the sun, and so on. But it turns out the leading theory now is that we talk about bird brains, but these bird brains, which are only a gram, contain quite a bit. They are sensitive to weak magnetic field variations, and they are actually following a magnetic line, taking them to where their nest is in New Zealand. So I'm saying we feel this conscience which we can't get rid of. I mean, how is it different from this bird who is going to keep on the straight line, not because of any shame he has or any conscious reflection, but somehow his brain has just been organized or created in such a way that it's going to have to go to this point.
Well, I'd first like to say what's so interesting about this discovery, monarch butterflies,
Oh, yes,
which make also this amazing trek, those butterflies are not returning to a place they've been to before. They're going to a place that, so the question was, how is this programmed in? And talk about a bird brain. What's a butterfly brain? I mean, it's got to be even smaller than a bird brain. But so this magnetic field theory of how it's working. So in other words, these creatures are pre-programmed to go to a certain place. Okay. So, but the conscience, we can argue with the conscience. We can defy the conscience. I don't think a butterfly can say, I'd really rather not fly here today. I think I'm going to go check out the Bahamas or something. I mean, there's no wrestling with the magnetic forces that are guiding the bird brains to where they're going. Whereas in our case, yeah, maybe we're programmed to have a conscience, but we're actually free to disagree with it and defy it.
Okay, so the question of self-reflection is that we may have a true north built into us, but unlike the butterfly or the bird, who simply, if it goes off course, automatically comes back.
Yeah.
We can say, no, we like it over here. We're not going to follow that. So we have a way of choosing whether or not we are going to follow that which is embedded in our heart, so to speak.
And it also, all these creatures, we call them creatures, meaning they're created by a creator to do certain things and to have certain natures and to be certain things and not other things. I'm not a butterfly. Butterfly is not a human being. So whatever wiring...
You identify as a human being.
Yeah. Maybe I should start identifying as a butterfly. I'll start wearing antenna to work. But anyway, the point is that to me, it's still an argument for a creator, because why am I not a butterfly? Why? I have a true north. Yes, I do. And yet it's on a different level from a butterfly. I even have free will. A butterfly does not. I mean, to me, this is not an argument against the reality.
Yeah, and I'd like to actually say that to actually agree with the devil's advocate in order to defeat the devil. I mean, I do think that a conscience is exactly the same thing. I do think that we are made in the image of God, which means that the desire to be good is part of the way we are pre-programmed. In exactly the same way that the bird or the butterfly will follow magnetic fields, we follow that spiritual magnetic field, which is called God. We're attracted to God, to the good. And now we also give them freedom. That is what makes us different. But the conscience, we don't have. And we talk about freedom of conscience. We can have freedom to defy or deny our conscience. But I would say our conscience is that pre-programmed package, which is attuned to the fact that we're made in the image of the maker. And we can defy it because we have free will. But the conscience is itself exactly the thing that the bird has and the butterfly has. It's something which is pre-programmed to attract us to home.
Very good, Joseph.
That's
Very, very good.
It is our good. So the birds have their good. We have our good. They follow it blindly without being able to resist it. We have a chance to resist it. Also, just as kind of a sidebar on evolution, one of the mechanisms of evolution is that there's these minor variations which give you a slight survival advantage. And therefore, those people survive more, they have the gene pool, and they reproduce more. But it always has to be a slight difference, right? Well, here's the problem. If you're flying from Alaska to New Zealand, and you have one bird which just flies on land, and the next bird has a development which allows him to go 10 miles offshore, well, he's going to drown. There's no survival advantage of getting partway to New Zealand.
Right.
You have to be able to fly for 7 days straight and in the right direction. Flying for 3 days won't help you.
Right.
Anyway.
Perhaps, Father, perhaps that's how penguins came into being. the bird fell into the ocean and had to learn to swim.
But okay, we are getting far afield here. But the fact of the matter is that
I'm being flippant. I'm just being flippant.
Flippant. You're getting
flippant.
Yeah, being flippant. Yeah, but this is one of the things that was discounted early on in evolutionary theory. The idea that because you fell in and learned to swim, that ability to swim was a genetic trait that you could pass on. It's not. It's a learned trait. Now, if the bird that fell in the water and learned to swim then taught its young to swim, that's one thing. And the young that couldn't catch on died, and they just, but this doesn't even hold up according to evolutionary theory anyway. So the real interesting question would be, as the magnetic poles change, which they're doing, and they've done multiple times in the life of the Earth, is this going to throw off some of these creatures' ability to migrate where they need to go? And then will that species adapt? Because we know that adaptations do occur. They do occur, but they don't occur with such drama that they can account for all these differences of creatures and all these differences of species and all these,
I can answer your question, actually.
Oh, you can?
I can, because they've actually done the scientific tests. The magnetic field reverses.
Yes.
But it's still on the same line. It just reverses polarity.
But it doesn't reverse, I thought the poles are actually moving gradually. Is that not happening?
That may be too, but then that would not, I don't think that would affect it as much as it reversing. But it turns out it doesn't matter which direction it is, they're going to follow the line.
So it could be when you ever take a string, like on a map, you put a pin here, and you attach a piece of string to another pin here. And even if the pins are moving, the string, if they're following the string, it'll work out okay. I don't know.
So back on a previous thing we mentioned here about, you said starting with literature.
Yeah, he started with literature, which I thought was interesting.
Literature, good literature addresses our conscience. And therefore, because the writer has a conscience, if the readers didn't have a conscience, they wouldn't be interested in it, right?
True.
But that made me think of an interesting piece of literature, which, because I think we do have a tendency to deaden our conscience or not reflect on good and evil and so on, that we kind of become somnolescent. And it's not we don't have conscience, but they've been clouded over, whatever. And the book, my favorite for that is Till We Have Faces, because you read the whole first part of the book, and you're kind of sympathetic with Oriwal and what she's doing, and then all of a sudden at the end, where now she's seeing her life reflected back. Oh my gosh, all the things we thought were normal, ordinary. What's wrong with that? And
justified, the things we thought were justified.
Yeah, I mean that's a conscious awakener, I would say.
And that's probably what purgatory is going to be.
I agree with
You're
that.
now going to see your actions and your decisions in the light of the fullness of truth, and you're going to go, oh my goodness. Yes.
Now you're going to see, according to Fire, you're going to see what God intended you to be when he created you.
Right.
And you're going to see what you became.
Right.
And you're going to see that he died
to fix the gap, to fill the gap. And now you're going to be filled with joy because the gap will now at last be filled. So how all these things are going to happen all at once.
Yes, but think of the pain at the first realization.
Yes, yes. You can't step into the joy without going through the pain.
Right. I mean, again, we'll see everything, all of our sins, how they nailed Christ to the cross, but also how they nailed our neighbors to the cross, and how they nailed ourselves to the cross. Right. All of that pain is going to be part of the purgatorial experience.
Yes, it's all going to be part of the big reveal. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But God is good. He wouldn't be doing it if it weren't for our good. So
why do we want a long life then if it's going to be building up more occasions for pain later on?
Well, you might be paying now to pay less later.
Well, that's true too.
As you age and get aches and pains and suffer all kinds of indignities, those might be opportunities to have some self-reflection.
Well, opportunities, but then of course if you act poorly, then you're making things worse, right?
Exactly. If you curse the fact that you're in pain today, I'm not sure how efficacious that is.
That's all right. God will give you more pain tomorrow, so you have a chance to redeem yourself. Well, I think related to this wiring is the next point that he brings up, the 5 transcendental desires. That in addition to the universality of conscience is the universality of what human beings truly desire, right?
Now, I actually found this very interesting because I'm ignorant of Plato, evidently, and philosophy generally. I always think about the 3 transcendentals that everybody talks about, the good, the true, and the beautiful, but I hadn't thought about 5 transcendental desires. And then when you think about it, just the first sentence of that section, this is section 3, the bottom of page 205. Plato discovered in about 400 BC that we have 5 kinds of transcendental desires. And then the desire, first of all, but not the thing itself, right? So perfect truth, the first, but the desire for it. This is a whole new animation to the understanding. The desire for perfect truth, perfect love, perfect goodness, justice, perfect beauty, and perfect being home. And for me, I could probably spend, well, first of all, I could probably write something for very long on it, but I could spend a long time just meditating on it, contemplating it. Because, first of all, the relation, the desire for it, but then the desire for perfection, right? God. But then, right, truth, love, then goodness and justice are juxtaposed. So there's some synonymous connection between that which is good and that which is just. And again, that in itself invites us to further contemplation. Perfect beauty, and then perfect being, and then that's juxtaposed synonymously, presumably, with the word home. That the perfect being is perfect home. In other words, to understand who we are is to be perfectly at home. And of course, to be perfectly at home is, if we made an image of God in perfection, we'll be perfectly at home when we're perfectly ourselves in the presence of the perfect home himself. And not until then.
Yes, Joseph, I had the same initial reaction to this. I mean, I'm used to speaking of the 3 transcendentals, truth, goodness, and beauty, which co-inhere, so not as if they're separate things. Also, being itself is considered so there's 4 traditional ones. I think you're right that I think that justice and goodness are really 2 different words for the same transcendental. I think there's only 4 transcendentals: truth, goodness, beauty, and then being itself, which is kind of the source of them all. And being home, that means being what you are,
Right. If we think of justice, I mean, sometimes people, when they hear the word justice, the first thing that comes to their mind is punishment. But if you think of the virtue of justice, which is just doing the right thing, well, doing the right thing is doing the good thing. The good thing is always the right thing to do, So
Yeah, except that I equate. And this might be problematic for some Platonic understandings of the transcendental, but I equate goodness with love, with virtue in terms of caritas, and that requires not just justice, but mercy. In other words, going further than justice demands. Now, I'm thinking about the mystery at the heart of the Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. Right, the devil knows the deep magic from the dawn of time, which is that justice has to be done. But what the devil doesn't know is the deeper magic from before the dawn of time, right? Which means that if an innocent victim chooses to suffer in the place of someone who deserves punishment, then time itself is turned backwards. In other words, the deeper magic transcends and supersedes the deep magic. In other words, that mercy and love supersede and transcend justice.
Okay.
I mean, because the crucifixion of Christ is not an act of justice; it's an act of love, right?
Well, I would say that because all these things are
Right.
unified in God, then I would say that his justice is also an act of mercy, because you can see this when you're a parent and you're correcting a child. A good parent does not arbitrarily correct a child to please the parent. The good parent corrects the child for the good of the child. And so while it comes across as I'm pointing out something that's wrong that needs to be rectified, or I'm pointing something out that's bad that needs to be avoided and the good that should be done instead, or whatever, that is the receiving of a kind of justice. But it's actually an act of mercy on the part of the parent who loves the child and wants the child to do better for his own sake, to become more what he's supposed to be for his own sake. So to me, justice and mercy, they can seem as though they're, I don't know, not opposite.
We can't, if insofar as we're Christ-like, we can't separate justice from mercy. I agree with that. But Christ, the crucifixion of Christ is an unjust act. In other words, that the act of laying down our lives for another, to be an innocent victim for the sin of another, is not an act of justice, it's an act of love. So in other words, that love does perfect justice, because justice without love is an eye for an eye. And that is what God comes to show us, that there's something beyond that.
Well, there's something
magic.
Yes, and I think your use of this expression from Lewis, the deeper magic, is really apropos, because what we're realizing is that from our human point of view, these things look like opposites. But the deeper magic is that in God, they're all his love. So that we have to take time to contemplate that, really. It's not immediately manifest how justice and mercy could somehow be the same thing. But what's that beautiful passage in Isaiah about the coming of the Messiah, where these things that seem to be opposed to each other are going to meet, they're going to kiss, they're going to
lion only down with the lamb.
Yes, but there's also other things in that, like the lion and lamb.
Right.
Okay, justice and peace will kiss, something and something will, this deep, deep understanding in us that somehow in God, this is all his love. But so anyway, this might not be helping. I don't know. But I'm just trying to get us away from seeing these things as opposing each other rather than somehow seeing things that have to come meet each other. And maybe you're saying the same thing by using this deeper magic. Yeah, on the surface it looks like this, but the deeper magic.
I have a distraction because it turns out that Isaiah actually does not say the lion will lie down with the lamb. They're different animals there. So check that out. I think it's in Isaiah chapter 2.
Might be different translations too.
No, it's in Hebrew itself. It entered into literature and into common, tradition, lion and lamb, but that's not what Isaiah says.
Right.
Trust me on that.
Okay, I do.
But check it out.
I do trust
but verify.
But the point is that
Yes,
the marks
absolutely.
of the coming of the Messiah and his kingdom are these apparent things that are in opposition with each other, coming into some kind of harmony. And of course, that whole passage ends with, and a little child shall lead them. The child, the coming of God coming as a child. All right, that already is like, what?
But there's two kinds of opposites, or two kinds of opposition. And one is sin, which leads up into opposition. And the other is just distinct persons. So the opposition of the lion and the lamb, in the sense that one is innocent and one is a predator,
right?
That's due to sin. But
Yes.
the opposition with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit is not due to sin. That's due to personal fullness,
Right.
So the transcendentals have to do which transcend any particular form of being, and I think they correspond to faculties that we have. So we seek the truth, and so truth is a transcendental of all being. We also desire the good, and so good is transcendent. But we desire the truth and the goodness of what is, and that's why being everything which is, it participates in being.
Right.
The other beauty is a little different in the sense that is the splendor of form.
Yes.
And that's one reason it has not been treated that much historically, theologically, philosophically, because it's clear that truth corresponds to the intellect. Goodness corresponds to the will. Being corresponds to what is. What does beauty correspond to? We don't have any faculty for beauty exactly, except incarnate. We only perceive the good and the true and the beautiful and being in things that are, that have a body. I'm not quite finished because I want to say that. So, but the difficulty is, how do you attribute that to the divine presence if God himself, prior to the incarnation, is pure spirit? What corresponds in pure spirit to what we call form in the material world? No, I'm finished now.
Well, and that segues into the incarnation. That God did take the form in the Son, becoming flesh, and so now we can see the beauty of his love enacted in what Christ does. Now we can see the beauty of it. And so, a good act by a human being is also a beautiful act.
Can I sort of just throw a spiritual?
I want to interrupt just one thing on this, though. I just want to directly to this, that would beauty have been a transcendental if God had not been incarnate? And I think the answer is no. I think that where we can see God as truth and God as goodness and God as being, the incarnation has allowed us to see that God is also beauty in some way that we don't really understand. But for us, beauty is always incarnate. There's no pure spiritual beauty.
Right.
That we can perceive.
I would argue possibly against that. And so this is something, I believe that when Jesus Christ says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," he is saying, "I'm the good, the true, and the beautiful." So the good is the will. Well, let me finish though. The good is the will, right? It's the way. The truth is the intellect, right? But beauty it's the life in the thing, not biological life, the life of the thing itself as made by God, and also and necessary the life in the beholder. So there has to be a process of living for us to experience beauty, both the life of the thing observed and the life of the observer, and the process of discerning the beauty in it. So I mean, God, when Jesus says, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life," I believe he's saying, "I'm the good, the true, and the beautiful," and I do believe that beauty is as transcendent, in other words, as spiritual as the other two.
Yeah, well, I guess we're going to disagree on that one. I think that's a Procrustean bed you're fitting the three things in there. But anyway, I mean, life is not necessarily beauty, right? I mean, you have to be alive to perceive truth too.
Sorry?
You must be alive to perceive.
No, I
truth.
think you're alive. You've incarnated it, which is fine. But I'm talking about life in a transcendent, pre-incarnational sense, in existing within the Trinity. That the beauty is the life of the Trinity. It's actually you have to have. It's the inhering life in a thing, and the ability to behold that life, the experience to experience that life because you're alive.
Well, you have to be alive to do any of the things, not just beauty. I mean,
Well,
they're triune, Father. They're triune. I'm not trying to separate it.
To this interesting question of beholding, the desire, it is eros that is the desire that is aroused by the beholding of beauty. Now we think of eros strictly in the sexual attraction area, but it's the beholding of beauty that causes you to desire it, causes you desire to possess it in some way. And so
I would say you have to be alive to the beauty.
Yes. I'm not addressing your previous point at all. I'm just going on this beholding, this need to behold something in order to apprehend beauty, going back to the necessary of a form that Father's talking about. I'm not arguing against what you just said. I'm just sort of going off another tangent. But we're getting the time signal,
right?
So maybe it's time for us.
The hook has
We're getting
come.
the hook. Yeah,
the hook has come. So we'll come back to something or other in this next session. Thank you. God bless you. If anybody's still there.
If you enjoyed this discussion, please help spread the word about the Forum Book Club by subscribing to the podcast and writing a review. You can sign up for weekly updates at forumedbookclub.ignatius.com.